For Oscar, this was not a good race.
Max is just, you know, like right now he is head and shoulders above everybody else. Is there an inherent issue with the car now that means that the tire management is just that much more difficult? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tired F1 Pod with me, Shez, and you, Ammar. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
F1 is back, and we were in
Yes.
the that's it, and we were in the land of the orange, and rather appropriately, a papaya car won the race. How did you take the race, mate?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting weekend, right? We had rain for the first 2 days, and kind of wish there was more rain in the race, but it was a good race. I mean, I would hardly put it in the top three most exciting races that we've seen, but I do think this race paints an exciting picture for the remainder of the season, and we'll definitely get into that. But by itself, the race was okay.
Yeah, it was it wasn't a completely by the numbers race, was it, in the end? There was a few bits and pieces to talk about, and
Mhm.
definitely some cars out of position and some cars performing better than I think we thought they were going to do. So why don't we get into some of the plot lines?
Let's do it.
Um, Omar, in terms of how the race developed, what happened for anyone that
Well,
didn't know or
so
doesn't know?
yeah, so am I being Lawrence Barretto now and doing a race cap in 60 seconds? I cannot do that. But
Less than 60 seconds, man.
I think the only memorable moments from the race start rather, was that Lando lost that place initially. It seemed like in second gear he had a lot of wheel spin. And Max made the most of what you would think. I mean, Max did his normal start. I don't think he did anything extraordinary,
I,
but
I would argue that Lando did his normal start too.
you're right. You're definitely right. But I think what was refreshing about that, and we'll get into it later, is that it didn't really matter, right? So there's that. But I mean, for
Yeah.
me, as a Ferrari fan, this was probably the most the best race start I can think of in a long time. I mean, Charles pulled off an excellent move in trying to jump Checo initially, and then Carlos did his thing too. And we didn't get a whole lot of time to kind of digest the race start, but from the glimpses that I do remember, that was pretty memorable. And Lewis did a great job too, right? And it did take a little bit of time eventually, but his stint on the softs were great too. So yeah, that
Yeah,
was my thing.
that's
What is yours?
that is nice. Less than 1 minute, and we got onto Ferrari despite McLaren winning. I love it. We are
I
definitely back.
am
Uh,
riding a high right now.
yeah. So look, I mean, for me, it was interesting that we did a video about some of the flaws that some of these drivers had, and actually some of the drivers um compounded those flaws. I thought this race, and some of the drivers actually seem to have improved or learned over the summer break and have come back better, fitter, refreshed. And it may be that this is anecdotal evidence because I'm just talking about one race, but there were some movers and shakers in terms of that dynamic. Let's start with Lando first of all. Lando's weekend started with an absolutely astonishing pole lap, but let's be honest about that lap rate. There was a little bit of it was yes, it was Lando being incredible, but actually as the race wore on, and we had a chance to digest that gap that Lando had managed in qualifying, 3.5 tenths, which is an absolute
Crazy.
acreage in 2024. Actually, the car clearly was the fastest car on the grid this weekend. We didn't get a chance to do this, but if you were really able to dial into to that qualifying lap, where Lando was really good was in the medium and high speed corners, which is basically what Zandvoort is. So if you were gonna find a track that was going to work to the McLaren's strengths, this was going to be that track. So he made the most of the car, and he sort of he exponentially got better. He raised the ceiling on that car, as it were, in Shez parlance. And then come the race, there we were, bated breath, holding on to our seats. What's Lando going to do first corner? What did he do? Wheel spin. Oh dear. overtaken again. And it was interesting, this one, because I was sort of thinking about that gap at the end of the race. It was what, 22, 23 seconds at the end of the race. That's a sort of max 2023, early 2024 kind of gap, but it would have been probably over 30, 35 seconds if he hadn't fluffed the start and had to give away 18 laps behind Max. Even though actually it was quite fun to watch him drop back, manage his tires, come back again, and then pull off an overtake, which I think Max really had no answer to. That's kind of my
Yeah.
Lando summary.
Well, I think given the last video, right? I think Lando gets an A plus in your grade book, right? I mean, we do A pluses here in the US. I don't know if you do that in the UK or not, but
No idea. We used to.
we used to,
We
yeah.
used to. I'm not sure we still do anymore.
I did want to
I haven't
ask you
taken an
about
exam in a
this
while.
though. I did want to ask you about this because one of the things I'm noticing as a trend now is that it seems like McLaren are better suited, or rather not as well suited to have a strong start. But as the stint wears on, it seems like they do a better job of managing tires, even when pushing hard, right? I mean, and I think this might be relative, right? And it's probably marginal in some cases, but it does seem like in all of these races, like even though Lando lost the position in the start, I never thought for a second that he wouldn't be able to overtake Max. I don't know why, but I just thought that, yeah, I mean, I've seen McLaren sort of be great towards the end of stints, and I thought it was a matter of time before it would happen. Now the question was he really going to be able to overtake Max or not, and what would that look like? But in the end, because the McLaren was so much stronger than Red Bull, at least on this occasion, that it didn't really matter. It was just a matter of time. But is that what you took away too? Is that, I mean,
But yeah, but I think this has been a ongoing thing throughout the season, right? Um, and I think it's been argued in a couple of different ways. Is it that the McLaren just takes a bit of time to get its tires up to temperature, and therefore a few laps for it to do that, and then towards the end of the stint, it's absolute fireworks? Or is it that the drivers taking aren't metering out the performance as well as they could do, and perhaps there's more meat in the tires at the beginning of the stint they could be taking out of it. I think it's I think it's the former. I think it is that the car just takes a little bit of time to warm up its tires, and therefore they have to go into a bit of management mode at the beginning of a stint, and then they're absolute guns blazing at the end, especially in Lando's hands. He's been really dynamite at this. But lap 18 was sort of mid stint here, wasn't it? They all went in for their pit stops around sort of lap
25,
20,
6,
25,
yeah,
26, right?
yeah.
So actually there was another sort of 8, 9 laps before they came in. So actually Lando was I think actually Lando was on Max quite early, dropped back, managed his tires, left himself enough, saw that actually Max was struggling, because this was something that was interesting in this race, is that the Red Bull, which has been an absolute beast in terms of looking after its tires, wasn't able to look after its tires. And I think that is definitely a cheeky bit of a conversation that we need to have as well when it comes to Max and the Red Bull, because that, I think it's important. But I think that's what happened with
Lando,
Lando,
yeah.
especially. Right.
Well, I mean, the other thing that stuck in my mind from the start, race start, is that his poor start affected Oscar's poor start. And then I think for Oscar, this was not a good race, especially given how we've kind of kept in high regard. I mean, towards the end, not being able to catch the Ferrari, and we can talk about Ferrari too. I mean, they definitely outperformed, but it's not all doom and gloom in Tifosi land, but definitely, I thought this is a pretty subpar race. I mean, if Lando hadn't got the win, they would have a bad taste in their mouth, considering they should have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting actually. Like, okay, he got a little bit fun, he got a little bit shuffled down at the start, but he was then never in clear air in the way that Lando was. Like, Lando was able to drop back off Max a little bit, charge at him, get past, use the superior pace of the McLaren, which Oscar never really did. So that, I think, is a mark in the negative column for Oscar, that he wasn't able to overcome the turbulent air that Lando was able to do earlier on. But then Lando was in free air for like the whole race, and he just pulled away, didn't he? He was able to unleash pace. And I read an article from Mark Hughes at the race just after qualifying, and He made the point, which is maybe something I haven't been able to articulate up until now, that I talk a lot about raising the ceiling and raising the floor, right? But I think raising the floor, maybe I've been underestimating a little bit, because actually raising the ceiling is a much easier thing to do. When you have a car that does what you want it to do, you gain confidence, you're able to push it a bit harder, and exponentially things get a bit better. Now, some drivers uh, create even more with that than others. But I think Lando was able to benefit from that this weekend, right? He showed it in qualifying that he had a car he was comfortable with under, in those types of corners. Even with the wind, he was able to do what he needed to do with it. And actually, it showed in the race that he was comfortable with the car. He was able to just push it and go, and was able to just pull out a gap. I think the raising the floor takes a bit more nuance, because it's not just about the fact that your car isn't doing what you want it to do, which is, I think, what Max, the position that Max found himself in this weekend, right? It's the fact that you have to consciously tell your brain, look, I can't drive the same way that I normally drive because my car isn't going to do it. And I think actually Max did
He
that, which is
said
why
that
he
too,
was,
right? Yeah, he said that on the radio as well. Yeah.
yeah, that like I'm having to drive differently because the car isn't responding the way it normally does. I'm having to make allowances for the car. That is a skill. And that's why for me, Max is just, you know, like right now he is head and shoulders above everybody else, because he's able to raise the ceiling to a level that few others can, but he's also able, when the car isn't there, to be able to adapt his driving style, no matter what the car is, to be able to get a really good lap time out of it. Um, that's quite a good segue. I think maybe we should talk about Max. So, did you have anything more
We
you wanted
should
to say
talk
about
about
Austin?
Max, and that's a good segue. But I just want to kind of put a final point on this.
Yeah.
What was really interesting to me in the whole race was actually what happened in the post race, which is to see the celebration from McLaren being less than jubilant. To me, this speaks volumes of where they think they're going to go. And I think that it's safe for us to put both championships on the table now. Like I think we can do that because the math is if the rest of the way, if Lando wins and Max does come second, Lando's still going to win the championship. Now, of course, there a lot has to happen there, but you throw in a DNF in here or something, it changes the complexion. And I think there are a lot of people around the paddock, far more skilled than I am, that are also saying the same thing. So I think just looking at the way they celebrated, Lando's body language right after that says to me that they're starting to look ominous now. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, I know Martin Brundle kind of said that in comms as well, didn't he? That he thinks that McLaren are going to be quick everywhere. They're now the quickest car. I
And there's one or two
uh,
races in there, right? But other than
Yeah,
that, yeah,
I think the only caveat I would throw in there is that there were not a lot of low speed corners here at Zandvoort. And actually in the few corners where you have to be really precise, actually Max in the Red Bull was better. If you look at sector 2
I agree.
in qualifying, actually Max was starting to get the delta back down again before the big open corners of sector 3 came along, and Lando just waltzed off again. So again, I don't know if that's driver or car, but I mean, genuinely,
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
hard.
know. So it will be interesting to see what happens. I think Monza's not going to be the track to give us any answers particularly. But when we get to Singapore, I
I
think
think
then
that's
we'll
right.
start to see
Yeah.
whether or not there's, that's a
Well,
true indication, or whether Red Bull didn't perform very well at Singapore last season. And actually having those 90-degree corners isn't going to be very good
they're
for
they're gonna
them.
hate it even more. Yeah.
But it's whether or not teams like Ferrari or Mercedes are suddenly further into the mix again at a track where it's not quite McLaren's cup of tea.
Well, and then to your point, and we're segueing into Red Bull now, right? Like, I mean, this genuinely looks like they have stalled in their development process, or at least are going backwards. I don't know if we can actually kind of say that or not, but
Well, they still
clearly,
finished second.
this is he finished second, Max, right? But this is Max being Max, right? Again, I mean, we could. I don't know that a different driver could have done that. I mean, you put
Yeah,
Checo
but
in
they
there,
don't.
he's
Yeah, but it
probably
doesn't matter. They don't
doesn't
need
matter,
another
right?
driver. They've got
Exactly.
Max,
That's
right?
right. That's right. So. I don't know. I mean, it looks like they're stuck. They really are. It looks like they just. I mean, even you listen to Christian Horner pre-race, and he does not look any close to optimistic. He generally has a positive body language, and to me, that suggests that everything that's been happening behind the scenes with the Adrian Newey fallout and resignation or whatever is now starting to catch up. And I wonder if they have. I mean, this is now a question of can they run the clock out? And I think the constructors is probably gone at this point. The drivers' championship is probably
So yeah. So I mean, you know what they could use right now is a little bit of Adrian Newey magic
is he
dust, but
technically he's still in contract with them, right? Up until a certain point,
yeah,
right?
but I don't think they've got another major upgrade coming for another couple of races anyway. So there comes a limit to
Also
what
not,
your
yeah.
factory can produce, right?
Yeah.
So within the budget cap, there's a limit to that. So I don't know, man. I'm not sure we're going to see a sudden turnaround. And McLaren came with an upgrade this season,
Well,
this race, and
they haven't come with one since Miami, right? And by the way, it's Adrian Newey's protege at McLaren, kind of working his
Rob
magic too.
Marshall,
So
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Rob Marshall. So it's not like yeah. I think the Delta and this looks like it's swinging away, right? And now it's a question of can Max drag them through the finish line or not? That's really the only thing that's left to see. But
Okay, so I just want to come back to
sure,
our tire management point, right?
yeah.
So look, a lot has been made about how Max is one of the best tire whisperers on the grid, right? And I think through 2021, 2022, 2023, he was awesome, incredible at it, right? You talked last video about Max having not been tested. Now, I think in pretty much every situation he has been tested, right? And actually, even in this season, where if he's not been in the fastest car, he's managed to get himself into a position where he is at the front anyway, right? In most situations, but there is a little bit of a trend happening now where when he's behind somebody else the drop off in tire performance is a bit more marked, right? And again, I don't know how much of that is the car, but we were talking a lot about how good the Red Bull was on its tires because of its aero efficiency and Max's style, actually, right? So Max's style is very much a kind of float the car into the corner, don't turn in too hard. That then doesn't take too much out the front tires, and the fact that he's already got the car turned in sweetly.
Kind of coasting
Um,
basically. Yeah.
doesn't take too much out of the rear tires either. So it's a lovely way to keep the tires alive. But actually, is there an inherent issue with the car now that means that the tire management is just that much more difficult? Because that's what caught him out this afternoon, right? It was the fact that after sort of 17, 18 laps, the McLaren was starting to come on song hard. Lando was able to do what he wanted to do with it, and Max was complaining about not being able to turn the car in. He was complaining about oversteer, like every which way. The tires were just giving up on him. Um, and I just want to.
You
I know
know,
everybody hates me for this, but I
he
just want to. I just want to contrast that with Lewis, who was a bit further back down the grid, right? He
made us
started off
up.
on the right. He started off on the soft tires, and again, it's a different car. The Mercedes, if it's in the right tire temperature window, tends to be a bit nicer on its tires. I think overall, and actually, both George and Lewis have been able to eke out stints. But Lewis in traffic was able to keep his tires alive up to lap 23, 24, wasn't he? I mean, I don't know if there's a little bit more work that Max could do in that last little nth bit of tire management. But it's difficult, isn't it, though? Like when you're trying to protect the lead for starters in a car that's slower than the car that's chasing you, and then trying to chase a car. We lost DRS so quickly that he never really had a chance to be able to use that advantage to keep his tires alive either. Um, so it's tricky, but I just wonder if there's if he's now in a position where he knows his car isn't as quick as the McLaren, maybe there's a little switch in the brain that needs to go, okay, right, accept this, work out what I can do to maximize my tire life in the stint to make sure that I've got as much as I possibly can towards the end of a stint. Because that's where he's losing out.
So, but I look, I don't fully disagree with you. I think the problem though is there is no downside to him going about it this way, right? Because there's nobody else competing with him right now. I think this race could have been different, and I think your point would have been even more valid, not that it's not valid right now, if Oscar was right there, right? Had Oscar had, I mean, he couldn't have had a better start because he was stuck behind Lando, and then of course then had he been able to get past George either very quickly or in the case of pit stops, and again, that was a weird thing that McLaren did there too, kind of leaving out there forever. But okay, it is what it is. That could have been a different thing. But I mean, my counter argument to your point is, what difference does it make? I mean, the worst he could have done is what he did right now. So maybe the math is, and in my opinion, I think the calculation was, look, we're not going to be able to keep the McLaren behind us too long. Let me see if I can get ahead, build a bit of a gap, see if I can manage my tires at a certain point. And I just think part of it, to your point, is that the car's characteristics probably just don't suit him or
Sure.
suit tire management at this point. And this is not the first time we've seen it. I mean, look, let's go back to Belgium too, right? He struggled to overtake a really slow Ferrari at the end of that race too, and it's not like he was competing with McLaren. The other thing I want to say, Shez, is if you sort of pull back and look at the big picture, right?
Mm.
You talked about 22 and 23, where really 23 they were so dominant that who
He didn't
cares?
have
Any
to. Yeah,
weaknesses
yeah,
that were
yeah,
there were
yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah,
masked.
yeah,
Like there
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
nobody.
yeah.
But this is the first time now that he's having a real challenge, right? And with McLaren putting really all of their chips correctly, especially Lando, that I think competition has now arrived at a very
Yeah.
interesting time since maybe early 22, and then 21 was what it was. But
Yeah, but what I'm talking about here is not like a major change in his driving style. All I'm saying is like if you're chasing perfection, because that's all you can do right now, right? Is absolutely monster your own game. Is perhaps think about how you approach that first in. So he gets into the lead, and his immediate objective is to get with over a second ahead of Lando to break the DRS, right? Now, you can argue that uh, that's the best thing that he can do to stop Lando coming back at him. But he knows that Lando's initial pace is not that brilliant, right? Because it takes a bit of time for the McLaren to load up its tires, and actually, it's towards the end of the stint that he's gonna come back at him. So perhaps the thought process could have been rather than going all out to get that more than 1 second, because you saw how Leclerc at the end of the race was able to hold off Oscar Piastri despite Oscar having DRS for that many laps around a track like this, where actually overtaking isn't that easy. It's not that easy unless you've got a delta, right? So maybe it's about not pushing the car that hard that early and just pegging it back a little bit, just getting a little, just allowing Lando a bit of DRS at the beginning, knowing that actually you can still hold him off anyway, and then eking out the gap a bit later. It's nuanced, right? It's so minuscule, but is there something that he can do there that might just have changed? I don't think it would have changed this race. Let's get that straight. It's not going to change this race. The McLaren just had too much pace in hand, but there are races coming up where this might happen again. And maybe that's an area that both Max and the Red Bull could work on.
I
It's
actually think
tiny.
that's what makes Monza and Baku interesting, right? Because I think what you're saying might come into play even more over there than over here. So, well, I agree with you. I think this, and I just think that this is, going back to the psychology of it, right? This is competition arriving at Max and Red Bull's doorstep in ways they probably didn't imagine either. Like I'm sure they never walked into the season thinking they would win, 23 out of 24 races, but I also don't think they thought this would be the case, right? And you can see they're having to play hard defense in every way they can. And it just changes the way you're probably not as calm and as calculated as you normally are, right? Like it's all kind of arriving really quickly. It's a home race for him. no matter what you say, the adrenaline is pumping, right? There's things happening there. But I agree with you. I think that's probably something that they need to look out for moving
Yep.
forward as well.
It
But
says Max Verstappen is Fernando Alonso 2012, and just remember in 2012, all it took was a couple of DNFs
that's it.
at Spa and
Well,
Japan
but I
for
think that's the key for Red Bull is can they keep a DNF away? Is there another engine penalty coming down the line or not, or some other kind of grid penalty?
yeah
Because now those grid penalties become very. I mean, even a
yeah
five-place grid penalty is
yeah
tough.
yeah. I mean, to do it to take the penalty in Spa, I thought was the right thing to do. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
tricky, right? We should move on a little bit. Let's talk about your team.
Yes. My
Go on,
goodness. What is there to
go
talk
on.
about? I mean, look, I mean, just reading social media all over it. I was like, oh, this is for me, it is what the drivers say after qualifying, particularly the Ferrari drivers, and I'm so tired, and I know Charles is too of coming on every time. He says it as much, right? He says every time I come on after these sessions and say we're trying to do our best, we're working as hard, but look, as of last night, when qualifying ended, he was 9 tenths behind Lando. And look, yes, this is a good result, but at the same time, he's still, what is it, like 25 seconds behind Lando? I think maybe a little bit more than that. So I don't know how I feel about this, other than the simple fact that
He was closer to Max, though, wasn't he? So
closer to Max.
at least one objective has been achieved.
Which my prediction coming into this second leg is that Ferrari would come second. I didn't say they would beat McLaren necessarily, but look, Red Bull is still in play. It is definitely in play. And the two and I have more faith in the two Ferrari drivers put together than the two Red Bull drivers put together. You know, of course, Max will do his thing, but um, I thought this was a brilliant race for Charles and Carlos too, by the way, to come from where they came. Charles did a really good move at the beginning of the race and uh, excellent with tire management. Speaking of tire management, and really did it well. Ferrari, for their part, they were the ones who triggered the first set of pit stops, which I was really happy to see that they played it so close enough. I think the pit window was 27 laps and they pitted at 25, which I thought was spot on. And then, I mean, eventually towards the end, he did a great job. Charles did of holding what happened.
Did George not come in before, Charles? Did I miss that? Did I get
Maybe
that wrong? But he had
I
a
don't
really
think
slow
he
pit stop.
did.
Maybe I got it the other way around.
Maybe, yeah, maybe he did. Okay, I just remember it in the context of like him being, yeah, you're right. Maybe, yeah, actually, you're right. No, I think Charles did because his undercut helped. Anyway, neither. It was George and Charles who did it,
I
right? But they're
promise we
thereabouts.
watched the race. I
Well,
promise we
we
watched it.
watched it. It's tomato, tomato, man. Come on, it's all good. No, I think it might have been George, but whatever it was, like I mean, Ferrari did all the right things too, and I think this again goes back to my. I mean, look, they came into the race not expecting anything and to walk away with a podium, and for me, he was the driver of the day. I know everyone wants to give it to Lando, and
I
all
agree.
fair credit to
Yeah,
him, but.
yeah. He
But
gets
for
my
him to
driver of the
pull
day
that
as well.
off
Yeah.
it didn't look like we were going to beat the Mercedes either, and so it looked like so that was great. And then Carlos was brilliant coming from P10 P10 after the Albon penalty, right? That was brilliant. I mean, I think they maximized P3 and P5 going into Monza, where once again I'm going to have my hopes high up. So yeah, there was that, but I cannot complain, really. I really can't. It's a very simple analysis on Ferrari this time.
Yeah. Listen, I can't rate Charles highly enough. He was incredible today. And actually, look, uh, our favorite clickbaity title for him is Jean Alesi. It's not for me. He is Gilles Villeneuve reincarnated, and his drive to keep Piastri behind him. If you're gonna pick a Gilles Villeneuve drive, that's Yarima. Where he kept a train of cars behind him in a Ferrari that basically was a truck. And Charles, although he wasn't driving a truck today, actually after a really good start, managed his tires brilliantly and was fast in the places he needed to be fast. That car was fast in a straight line. You saw what Carlos was able to do with it from his starting position, and Shah was able to keep pace, make passes when he needed to. There was a really good bit of strategy from the pit wall for once. Good pit stop as well, under 3 seconds, where others were making 3 and 4 second pit stops.
Mm.
Really, really good from that point of view. And I have to say, I talked in our last video about Charles' big flaw being that he drops it massively when the car and the team isn't there. But actually, this weekend the car wasn't there. Like you said, he was 9 tenths off the pole sitter. 9 tenths off the pole sitter on Saturday. He didn't drop his head. He didn't lose pace. Yes, he was obviously disappointed that the Ferrari with his upgrade wasn't up there with the best of them. But actually, he did what he needed to do with the car that he had, kept pace, didn't lose his head, made good, used the strategy well, and thoroughly drove a great race. And I agree with you. For me, he was a driver of the race of the race, and that's what I wanted to see Charles do. Again, this is n=1 when it comes to the number of races that we've got, and that's anecdotal evidence to
Well,
me. But if this is what he started to do towards the end of last season, but with a car that suited him, now that he's got a car that maybe still suits him but isn't the fastest on the grid, if he can continue to do that, I think that for me, that's flaw sorted.
you know what? You know how when you reach a point of exhaustion, right? Mentally, emotionally, that's what I see in Charles because they have beaten it out of him over the course of the last 5 races or whatever since Monaco, and then he's kind of like, what the heck, man? Let's
Mm.
just do it, and then it works when it works, and it doesn't work when it doesn't work, and on this occasion it did. But can I just just
Yeah,
just
I mean,
behold this for a second, right? For all his critics, right? If Lando Norris manages to win the championship this year, and Charles is again left with the pieces of what appears to be a broken Ferrari, that I'm gonna feel bad for him so much because it's just gonna be unfair. It just simply is.
it won't hurt him in terms of where we should rate him
Sure.
because I think Charles for everything that everyone says about him has always shown that he's a quick learner. Like he beats himself up, but he doesn't often make the same mistake twice.
Twice.
Yes, he does. Yeah, his natural instinct is to push the car as hard as it possibly can, but he doesn't. That
I,
that inherently will mean that he will fall off the road a bit more than
I,
usual.
I
But he does. Yeah, where he's been criticized for chewing up his tires earlier in his career, he doesn't do that
he
now.
doesn't do that
Where
anymore.
he's been criticized for making strategy errors, yes, there was the howler in Silverstone, and Canada wasn't
Well,
great either. But actually, there are glimpses that he's starting to understand
look,
that as well. He is just a driver that needs a bit more from the pit wall, and you can't say that drivers like Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton are also not drivers that need their pit wall to tell them
correct.
what to do.
Well,
Yeah,
I think the analysis that we, and I mean the general we make in reflecting on drivers and the way they perform is that we never can quite accurately under or rate their psychology in terms of where they think their car's at, right? Because we can agree on this. Whether you and I can agree on whether Mercedes is faster than McLaren is faster than Red Bull or not, these drivers have a really good sense of where they're at in the pecking order, right? Of course, things can happen over the race weekend. Of course, stuff can happen, but they generally know, like Max knew coming into this weekend, that they were not the quicker car. And I think similarly, if you look at the environment at Ferrari and you look at what Leclerc has been through these last 2, 3 years, I mean, going back to 22, I think there's something to be said about the cumulative effect of, really PTSD from all of that, where
yeah,
as a driver, you just feel like, wow, geez, I need to do even more. I need to do even more. And then you can't find the limit. And that's been the criticism against him, which is fair, but I think that's where the team comes into. And so I couldn't be more happier about what happened. Was completely not expecting a podium. I don't even think I was expecting a top five finish, let alone. So to see a P3 and a P5 was it's just quite amazing. I just hope that this doesn't mean that the next couple weekends ruin my life, but there you have it. But can we move on to your your team, your driver or whatever you want to call it, your favorites, faves. What happened to Mercedes? Like they just seem to have an off weekend.
yeah, bad pace, right?
They just were not there. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say I was a bit surprised. But again, Lewis, I don't know what happened, man. Like he came back after his after the break. He went off and spent his holiday in Africa, which go check out his Instagram. Great photos, great stuff he talked about. But um, yeah, again, he was talking this time about we had massive understeer in FP2. Didn't get a chance because FP3 was red flagged, so we only got about 10 minutes. And we dialed too much oversteering, and then the car was just too oversteery in qualifying. And we know that Lewis's style is to stamp on the brakes hard and late to try and to get the car turned in, but that requires a stable rear end to stay with him. When he doesn't have that, and the car is oversteery, you could see in the lap, if you watch the onboards, there were just so many laps where he turned in, and then mid corner he's having to make a correction. And he never seemed to quite settle with the car. And he talked about that. It was just too loose at the rear end. It's weird, actually. I have to say, I listened to an interview that he did with Martin Brundle. I don't know if you guys have seen that, the one where he's sitting on the couch with Martin, and they're talking about his past races and stuff. And he talked about how the McLaren that he drove in 2007 had a really loose rear end, but he was able to use that to his advantage, to chuck it in and just hold on to it in fast corners. For some reason, in this generation of cars, he, or maybe it's something that's sort of evolved over the course of his career. He's just not able to live with it quite in the same way that he did in 2007 and 2008. And for me, I
blame
wonder
it.
if that.
I blame it on the car. I cannot blame a seven-time world champion for not getting it right.
Yeah,
So,
but the
I mean,
problem
that's
is
just...
the problem is that his teammate finishes
Yeah, but it's
fourth,
also easier, right? Because
and he was he was half a second away from his
Yeah,
teammate,
I thought that
right?
was a shocker. Like, I didn't expect. I mean, you could see Carlos getting eliminated from from I think Q1. He was almost gone. But I mean, it was just a set of unfortunate circumstances. I did not expect that to happen to Lewis and Mercedes. But I think the margins are so fine now. Like it is just that. Like you can't.
But
And
I
I
mean,
think
but
that's what
half a second's a decent chunk,
it's
though,
a
man, in
decent chunk.
Q2.
It is a.
But
I mean,
having go on.
Charles was almost a second behind on
But
Saturday, and
maybe
then
come on,
Sunday is a different deal.
we're
So
talking about different caliber drivers,
no, no,
though,
I
man.
know. I
Like,
mean, yeah, but I
like,
I agree. I mean, but it's just that easy, right? It's just that easy for that kind of stuff to
yeah, I
happen
mean,
too.
maybe. But having said that, his race pace was
It's
really
pretty good.
really
Yeah.
good. You know, actually on those softs, he managed to keep them alive. Again, you can say, oh, it was the car, but actually, he made some decent overtakes. Hulkenberg
Yeah.
maybe took a few more laps than it needed to, but Stroll, Alonso, boom, 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 just dispatched like that. That's the 2018 Lewis I remember. For me, that was the best season I've ever seen Lewis drive before 2021, at least, and we'll have that debate another time. But
Well,
you know, that was where it was decisive. Like every move he made, it was a pass. That's what he needed to do. But yeah, still ends up a minute behind the leader in the end. It was pretty.
it's
Yeah,
pretty tough. I mean, it's pretty tough on a track like this because I mean, in the first couple of laps, he was already like 8 seconds behind. So it's slightly unfair. But what are they doing with George? Like,
yeah,
I never
yeah.
quite
I was
understand.
going to ask
What
you the
is that?
same. I was
What
going to
what
ask
they
you the same
doing?
question. What did you think
I
of
don't know.
that?
That was a head scratcher. I was like, I don't quite. So they gave up a position in order to try to get a quick lap in. They thought he would fastest lap, and then he was gonna somehow George was gonna overtake
Perez
Sergio
and
on track
Sainz, right? Because
and Science too.
I
That they
think that was
were.
their
And
argument, right?
Science
Because
was
they
inevitable. They were gonna lose out to him. That you kind of knew right before he pitted. Like that wasn't.
yeah.
But like even to
Was
lose to
Perez
Checo.
catching him? I don't know. I don't think he was catching him, was
Pretty
he?
sure he could have held them off. Like
Yeah,
I think they got the math wrong on that one. Like I mean,
yeah.
you win some, you lose some with
Yeah, I
that,
mean the
right?
Lewis one I kind of understood.
Yeah, because he had all. I mean, that was a different strategy Lewis was on, right?
Yeah, and I think actually, uh, yeah, the undercut in the end didn't really work out for Lewis, did it? Like finish like going onto the hards as early as he did, he kind of lost the advantage, and actually he only really got past Pierre Gasly. That was the only driver he managed to get past using the undercut. Everybody else was status quo, so I don't think he had anything else to lose by sticking the softs on at the end, given that he had a free pit stop. But
He looked quicker
yeah,
than George in the end, right? I mean, that would have been
yeah,
interesting
I
had
think,
there been
I
like
think they
five more
got,
laps.
yeah, but
But
I think they got told to hold station at that
yeah,
point, didn't they? I
yeah,
think they've
yeah.
just told to just
Yeah, I mean, look, when you start
back off.
P15, there's not a whole lot you could do with. I
14,
mean, it's P14. Sorry,
P14.
yes, that's right. He was got it with the Albon penalty. But Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they could have done much, but I think they just didn't look quick on this occasion. And I think you can see again they were just trying to gamble away, and hey, they unnecessarily lost points to Sergio. I don't think that that's something they should have
Yeah.
done, but it is what it is. It's a pretty. I mean, this goes back to the Belgium thing, right? Like it worked well when he when he stayed out, and then this occasion it did work well. So it is what it is. They just didn't seem like they were in it, and I kind of expected them to be right in the mix
I think
with
we all
Red
did.
Bull, but
Yeah, I think
that
we
was
all
a more
did.
disappointing thing. So
Yeah, I think
I
we
don't
all
know.
did.
Yeah.
Right. That's the top four teams. Any other major business? I think that's probably the crux of the matter.
Crux of it.
Um, Let us know what you think. Do you guys think that Max could do a little bit more in terms of his time management? Is Lando about to suddenly drive off into the distance, or does he still need to work on his starts? Um, all that and more. Please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment, and we will read every single one of them, and we will reply to as many as we possibly can. Ammar, we'll see you guys in the next one. Say it.
Later.